Hello, welcome to another episode of Inside the Huddle. Today is Sunday, March 16th. This is episode 55 of the Inside the Huddle podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. Make sure to please like and subscribe. Appreciate all of your support. Been a busy week in the NFL. Free agency started on Monday. New league year officially began on Wednesday, and we've got a lot of moves to discuss today. Lots of teams making some big moves before, of course, the NFL draft in about a month and a half from now. So off season's in full swing. We've got a lot to discuss. DiMari, how's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Like you said, very busy week. I mean, free agency is still active right now, and for the signings that did happen, some of us are very happy with what our teams did. Others maybe not so much, but a lot of surprises. We've seen a lot of moving pieces, so kind of feels like I know I said this last opening for last week. Kind of feels like the NBA where you see a lot of guys moving around, new faces and new homes. 2025 is going to be exciting. So very excited for the draft, see where some of these rookies might land. But so far, free agency has been very good to us, giving us lots of news. So let's get into it.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a busy week. Some surprises, some moves that you kind of expect, but obviously a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, always this time of year. So we'll start with the Seahawks. Then we'll get into some other teams, and then we'll get into some other remaining free agents and any other signings to discuss a little bit later on. But Seattle, it feels like kind of got this offseason started in a way where you move on from Geno Smith, you trade him to the Raiders. And we talked about this last week. At the time, it felt like a very questionable or sort of questionable move where you trade Geno. Good move, of course, for the Raiders. He reunites with Pete Carroll. They get a quarterback. But from a Seattle perspective, it was basically you've got to go get Sam Darnold, or this is a problem because you're not going to roll Sam Howell out there next year. You're not going to go and sign a Jameis Winston or one of those guys who's a downgrade to Geno Smith. So if you were going to trade Geno, you had to end up going out and getting Darnold. And on top of trading Geno, they ended up trading DK Metcalf as well, just shortly after we got done recording last Sunday. So you started basically this week with Geno and DK, or you started last week with Geno and DK, and then you enter this week without Geno Smith, without DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett, of course, leaves in free agency. So you look at this team, and it was question at quarterback, and you moved on from two receivers, or you didn't bring Lockett back. You traded DK. You looked at this team, and they were in a very tough spot, plus some questions among the offensive line going to this week, and they made some really nice moves. You go out and sign Sam Darnold. That felt like the move that they needed to make. And then most recently here, you bring in Cooper Kupp the other day, a move that I think me and you both really like, and a move that I think a lot of Seahawks fans should really like. I think we're both very high on Cooper Kupp still at this point in his career. I think a lot of people, and especially I feel this way, I feel like a lot of people are kind of discounting what Cooper Kupp can still do. I think Cooper Kupp's a lot better than I think people are kind of putting Cooper Kupp into the old wash tier a little too early. I think he's still got a lot to give. So Seattle went from moving on from three pieces to adding two big pieces, potentially more to come, to add on to obviously Kenneth Walker and of course JSN. So what is your thoughts on Seattle so far?
Yeah, I actually like what they did, and I mean, I know losing DK is going to be a big thing. Of
Yeah.
course, losing Lockett, who's a guy that been there forever, is going to be also a huge blow. But like you just said, I think Coop has a lot left in the tank, and he's not washed yet. I think he has like 2 to 3 good more years, and they just it's how do I say it? It's a risk you're gonna have to take. So I mean, again, you kind of said it where you're looking at this team and there were so many holes, and DK, you kind of thought he was unhappy as it is, so you move on, you kind of grant his wishes, you do that. And
Yep.
it was great that they did find the replacement. They bring in Cup, obviously with Darnold. They brought in Darnold, got rid of Geno, which is great. So they are instantly filling those holes that they need instead of trying to attack it in, the draft that you might not get the guy that you want. I think another big player that we kind of missed out on, and the name doesn't jump out. He had some problems with drops, but it's MVS.
Yeah.
You look at the Seattle team. DK was that kind of deep threat, and JSN, yes, not too much. Lockett, obviously, really a possession guy. You add MVS to that offense as well. You have a guy that can stretch the field. Your deep ball receiver, which I feel now this receiver core is very balanced. And I honestly think, I know I said it off air, but I think Seattle probably should be the favorite to win the NFC West come next year. Again, you still have the draft and, additional moves that they are going to make, but this is a team that knew what their issues were coming into the offseason. They addressed it. They will continue to address them. So I really like what Seattle did.
Yeah, I do too. And it was a good pivot because early in the week, or going into the week, I should say last week, you had a lot of questions about what they would do. There was definitely a lot of concerns about how they would recoup or I guess fill the holes that was filled, there by DK, obviously Tyler Lockett, and then of course Geno, and they filled him perfectly. You mentioned MVS. I think that's a good signing as well. A guy last year kind of had a weird 2024, right? Started with the Bills and then goes to New Orleans, played better with New Orleans. I believe he had like 4 touchdowns. He found the end zone quite often with them. There was a couple weeks where he had a couple big fantasy performances. I remember was a potential waiver wire ad for some people. So kind of a strange year for him, but just a good steady veteran. Yeah, he does have drop issues, but you're not asking him to be your number one. You're asking him to realistically be your third behind JSN and then now Cooper Kupp, or more so your second, I guess, outside. Cooper Kupp lining up at the slot. But yeah, I like it for Seattle. I think the biggest question now for Seattle is the offensive line is still a little bit of a concern. It looked like they were going to get Will Fries, who they didn't sign. It looked like they almost matched the offer, but they didn't. It was kind of weird. Still need some help along the offensive line, but weapons wise, they are still in a good spot. I guess my question is, now we know what Darnold, right? When Darnold first went there, it was Darnold and nobody. It was JSN. They didn't even sign MVS yet. They didn't have any of those guys. I guess, what are your expectations now? Seeing how this offense is, because we talked about this a little bit last week, what Darnold would look like. It's kind of, I don't really know what we should expect out of Darnold, right? $100 million contract. Is this a true Baker Mayfield situation, true Geno Smith situation where he's going to have 3-4 more good years, or is this a 1-year thing? I guess, do you like Darnold's chances here of succeeding, replicating what he did last year with this offense?
I do, but I do, but I don't think it's going to be the exact same. And I know we
Mm-hmm.
said it last week. You're not throwing a Jefferson and Addison and Hawkinson no
Yeah.
more. And, I'm not discounting JSN, who has been very good. MVS, like you said, a great second half of the season. Last year, obviously, we are familiar with Cooper Kupp. The weapons are completely different. It's a whole new scheme. You're throwing the ball to new guys. So I think it's going to take some time for them to gel. So, I mean, I'm not expecting Darnold to come out the first 3 to 4 weeks completely slinging it. And we're talking 12 touchdowns, maybe 2 interceptions. Like, I just don't see that being from Darnold.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, yeah, with that contract, he does have to be the guy. That's what they paid him to do. But, I mean, again, we seen some great glimpses of Darnold last year. We seen some terrible glimpses of Darnold last year. I think he needs to go in and kind of try to reach for that Baker type of comeback player type of arc. And if he doesn't do that for Seattle, I mean, that's just unfortunate for them. But I honestly think Darnold kind of understands it now. That last year with O'Connell, I think definitely helped him out. And I think he's going to continue with this year.
Yeah. I feel like the jury's still obviously out on him. I think the jury is still out on some of these guys or more so just him, really. The jury, I think, is still out on if he can have another big year, if he really can have this Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith resurgence. But it's not Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, like you mentioned, but it's still very good weapons, and Seattle has put him into a good position here. I think when you look at the Seattle team, I know you were mentioning the record a little bit. You're 10-7 last season. They started out 3-0, I believe, and then they kind of collapsed. They went through that rough stretch. Then they were like 1-5 after that 3-0 start, and then they came out of their bye week, won like 4 straight. but it was ultimately too little too late. You mentioned this team probably being the favorites in the West, especially when you look at what's happening in the West. Arizona's Arizona. They're not moving the needle a ton. I think they're kind of going to be that team that's going to hover around 500, around that area, 9-8, something like that. 8-9. The Rams are still a threat, of course, bringing back Stafford. San Fran is tearing it down. They are completely gutting it. Weird situation with Kyle Juszczyk, who they got rid of and then they brought him back, which was kind of strange, but felt like it was kind of a test the market. Once you get your value, if you could, then we'll match it or whatever, you could come back. And you have Seattle, 12-win team, 11 wins or 10's enough, depending on how weak the West can be, especially with a team. If San Fran has another year like last year, which feels like they're heading in that direction to another non-playoff season.
I think 10's enough. Not confident 11 or 12, because that's what we felt for Atlanta, and we kind of seen how that went. But like you said, you started out 3-0. You went through a rough patch there. You kind of bounced back towards the end of the year, and that's when Geno was obviously playing some of his best ball. So you kind of look at how this roster is constructed now, and again, more moves to be made, and then the draft. You're like, they can't possibly be any worse than what they were last year, which still kind of tough to say because you still went 10-7 in the NFL in that division. And I know Arizona's Arizona, but you still have San Fran, you still have the Rams there. Like, that is a still very tough division. It's just no one over there is going to win 12, 13, 14 games. So for Seattle, again, you bring Darnold to be the guy. You add some weapons for him, some much needed weapons. You kind of get a little bit younger in a sense, but you get some experience as well at the same time, moving on from different guys and whatnot. So I think, 10 has to be enough, but still can't overlook the Rams, like you're saying, which we're not going to get into. But I think Seattle should definitely, again, be the favorite.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. I still think it's realistic probably for two teams to get in.
Yeah.
Because, if you look at, unless if there's a surprise in the NFC South, because you look at the NFC North, there's three teams coming out of there this year. It's going to be Detroit. It's probably going to be Green Bay. And then depending on what happens with Minnesota's quarterback situation, it feels like it's either going to be Minnesota or Chicago, year one under Ben Johnson. And then the NFC East, you're getting at least two. Philly and Washington's in it. We'll see what happens with Dallas. The Giants, probably not. Unless if they get, Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers turn back the clock. We'll see what happens there. But they're probably Giants at most are probably a 7-win team this year at best. You're probably realistically looking at 5 and 6, and then finding Arch trying to get Manning in the draft next year, if we're being honest, Giants fans. So, yeah, I think there's still a good chance for NFC West. Only had one team last year. Of course, that was the Rams. Seattle being that other team, which would then eliminate one. Then you'd have to hope that, or it could just be Seattle and the Rams versus the playoffs. It'd be interesting because then if you look at the NFC South, the NFC playoff picture just in general is going to be interesting this year because you can make a case for 3 teams in the East, all 4 teams in the North, 2 teams in the West, and the NFC South is terrible, but maybe Carolina. I know we'll probably have our fair share of Carolina talk this offseason. I think, last year we bashed Carolina a lot. This year, I think it's going to be the opposite. There's a chance that they're actually make some noise. So it'll be interesting to see how the whole NFC playoff picture plays out. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear. Seattle probably win a division, and then the Rams probably behind them. Arizona doesn't move the needle much, and then San Fran. I'd be shocked. They have not. All they've done really is subtract from a team that was 6-11 last year. So I think they're entering kind of through like a retool. I don't think they're going on a full-on tear it down rebuild. I think they're retooling, and maybe you're back 2026 realistically competing again. If they hit on some draft picks and develop some of the younger guys, right? Ricky Pearsall, some guys like that start to develop and, fill the holes of Debo and some of these other guys. And then maybe you find yourself back in the conversation. But yeah, definitely something to look for. Now, just with the DK Metcalf stuff, I do want to take a little bit of a Pittsburgh approach to things. They lost their starting quarterback in Justin Fields, or sort of their starting quarterback. He goes to the Jets, of course. Good chance, or there is a chance they won't have Russ either. So for Pittsburgh, you have questions at the quarterback spot. Before we get to the quarterback spot, though, I guess from a Pittsburgh perspective, because we talked about it from the Seattle perspective, what was your thoughts on the DK trade? All I'm saying is whoever the quarterback is next year, they're going to have their hands full with the two whatever range of emotions that you're going to get out of DK Metcalf and George Pickens. I mean, I'll tell you what, some of those quarterback wide receiver meetings, this would have been the year to have Hard Knocks in the AFC North. DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and like Russell Wilson in a meeting together. This would have been the year.
I mean, Pittsburgh always had, the steel curtain. They've always had this like type of aura to them, I guess, where it's like black Air Force energy. And now you get two guys over there that play with black Air Force energy. And I don't know who's going to be throwing the ball next year, but I agree. They're going to be in for a long 17 games next year, probably more depending on how it shapes out for them. But, just aside from the personalities and whatnot between the two guys, I like the move for Pittsburgh. I mean, we have talked constantly, even last year, about them not having great weapons, them still finding ways to sneak into the playoffs, finding ways to stay positive or stay over 500. So for Pittsburgh, I mean, you get a guy that is consistent. We know what DK Metcalf brings you. He aggressive, consistent, again, deep threat. He does everything for you. And I think that is definitely what they were missing because, again, I know we said it's about George Pickens, but George Pickens just really wasn't moving the needle enough. I'm not saying he's not a great player, but I think I've said this before where he's not really a game changer. You look at George Pickens, something on Twitter and you see a 38-yard grab from George Pickens, you're like, he's going off today. But he really has 43 yards on like 6 targets. So I think for them, this should allow Pickens to kind of continue to excel, and same for Metcalf because you can't double cover both of them. Still question mark of who's going to be in the slot for those guys. Make sure I don't know if it's going to be Calvin Austin that they roll out. But, I mean, for Pittsburgh's sake, I think they finally probably came to that realization like, hey, look, inside this division, you got Cincy, you got Baltimore. We need to do something. We need to find a way to not be on the level of them, but to be better. Because being borderline on the same level as Baltimore and Cincy, you're never going to beat them. You're never going to win that division. You have to be better. I think going out to get DK was a start, but swinging on Sam Darnold, I think, was a huge miss because now you still have that gaping hole at the quarterback spot. So I don't know what Pittsburgh is going to do there, but just as far as DK being in that uni next year, I think that definitely boosts that offense. They just got to now adjust to the modern like football offenses and kind of get away from the Ice Age style of offensive play.
They get away and getting back to the offense, or not really. I don't even know if I'd say getting back to the offense modern day because I don't really know if they've ever been there.
starting the modern day.
Yeah, starting the modern day offense. Yeah, look, it's a good move for Pittsburgh. And I totally agree with you with George Pickens. Like George Pickens will have, and we've talked about him a lot, he'll have elite moments, but he's not like an overall elite. He hasn't had an elite career. Like he's not an elite wide receiver, but he'll have elite moments. You'll see that one-handed catch on social media that everybody will go crazy about. And he'll have a game where he's targeted 6 times and he'll catch 1 ball in a big game against Cincy to end the year. Like that's kind of the George Pickens you're going to get. And maybe he becomes more consistent and becomes better just because now you have DK taking some of the attention off of him. Look, DK is a very good receiver. He's obviously a guy that's, had 3 1,000-yard seasons, would have been on his way to another 1,000-yard year last year, but missed 2 games. Obviously just a monster of a human being, a big-time threat. The biggest question is just the quarterback. They also lost Najee Harris too, so I think, does Jaylen Warren just fill that hole? I actually feel like Najee going to the Chargers could kind of be a positive for Pittsburgh. I think they need a little bit of a different type of running back at that position. they need more of a speed guy, a guy that can, hit the open field and take it to another level. Najee Harris was never that guy. He always felt more of that downhill physical type of runner that was never going to go blow by you with speed. And I think Pittsburgh needs more of that in their offense. Najee Harris might be a very good fit in the Chargers. Pittsburgh, they don't really need that type of running back. That running back is just another example of why their offense, in my eyes, is so behind. Like, you're never going to get that big play out of Najee Harris. Not saying you're going to get out of Jalen Warren, but I don't know. Who knows? Maybe you do. They did sign Kenneth Gainwell as well. So do you kind of just have those two guys compete? I don't know. The running back spot's interesting. And then quarterback. The DK move's good. I don't know. I still think this is still have Arthur Smith as your offensive coordinator. And do you trust Rod? If Rodgers goes there, do you trust them with? I don't know. That's just I just don't see that working. And it's nothing against Rodgers and the Jets. It has nothing to do with that, because I know a lot of people are probably gonna think, oh, I'm a Jets fan and I just hate Rodgers. No. To be honest, I really don't hate Rodgers. Look, it failed here. I'm not gonna I don't really have any ill wills towards the guy. It didn't work here. It is what it is. The biggest thing with Rodgers is he has an ego. Mike Tomlin likes to do things his way. And then you have two receivers who also have egos and that's four kind of power hungry people that want things done their way. I don't know if that'd work. But who else is out there? I mean, you swung and missed on Darnold. It felt like they maybe were sort of in on Stafford either way. Stafford always felt like he was going back to the Rams. It was more so test the market, see what other teams value, how they valued you, and then come back to us and we'll get you the proper deal. I also think Stafford likes it out there in LA. I can never see him coming to the East Coast to Pittsburgh or the Giants. He has got it made out there. He can retire out there. There's no sense in him coming to the East Coast. But if it's not Rodgers, who is it? Winston? You have Winston throwing passes to those two guys next year?
I see that's the Darnold thing. It hurt so much because we're going to go back to Rodgers. I mean, we're talking about that offense needing some advancement. We need to see something more modern from that offense, and Rodgers is not that. And I mean, unfortunately, you watched 18 games of it. Yep. With 17 and 4 snaps. 17 and 4 snaps where everything is just so old school, and it's everything is under center and everything is play action. Everything is getting the ball out quick, which, obviously Pickens and Metcalf are two guys that are dangerous in space. Yeah. But I just think I don't think a lot of their production is going to come from quick slants and quick hitches with Rodgers. Obviously, maybe they might change their play style and gel with Rodgers what Rodgers wants. But again, like I said, these are two guys with bigger egos and they play a certain way, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just think Rodgers does not fit those two guys. And I mean, if you look at it from the name standpoint of it, Rodgers, Metcalf, Pickens, you're like, oh, this offense is going to be amazing. But then you look at how those two guys play, you look at how Rodgers looked with the Jets, and you can argue, actually, it's not even an argument. The Jets you guys had way better weapons than what Pittsburgh has, and it didn't work out. So what is the difference with Rodgers now with Arthur Smith? And I think, and it might get to the point where Arthur Smith might just go on vacay and let Rodgers call the entire offense for you, because they're not going to be able to get along. Yeah. It's just not going to work out.
And you make a really great point about Arthur Smith, because if you saw some reports towards the end of last year that Smith kind of wanted Fields back, because supposedly him and Russell Wilson really didn't see eye to eye. Russ kind of wanted to do things his way. Smith wanted to do things his way. Fields was kind of the only one. I think also Smith also felt like he could get a little bit more out of the offense with Fields, who can, was a little bit more mobile, could run a little bit, younger, fresher legs. Talk about fresh legs. Rodgers does not have that. He's a pocket passer now. That's all he is. He used to be mobile earlier in his career. I think now he showed a couple moments last year of mobility, but overall he's pretty much shot. And yeah, I mean, how is that gel too? I think you make a great point with that. Rodgers is going to want to do things his way. Arthur Smith's going to want to do things his way. That's the biggest issue with Rodgers. That's been one of the biggest downfalls of his career. He leaves Green Bay because Matt LaFleur wanted to run the offense more modern day, and Rodgers didn't. So he comes to the Jets. They bring in Nate Hackett. That form of offense, a very little pre-snap motion, a lot of shotgun, not much under center. That form of offense does not work in the NFL today. No play action, none of that. They don't run nothing. That's not what Rodgers does. And that doesn't work in this modern day NFL. It worked 5 years ago, but the game has changed. So unless if Rodgers would be willing to change that, and he would have to be, because that's the thing with Pittsburgh is you could see why bringing in Rodgers would be the move, but then at the same time, Rodgers running that kind of offense that's outdated, does that really move the needle at all for Pittsburgh? They're already running an offense that's outdated. Everything's slow, sluggish, and boring. So Darnold was the big miss for them.
I honestly think this might sound crazy, but you're in a situation, you look at the rest of the market, it is kind of Rodgers and Winston. I say you go get one of those guys and you draft a Jackson Dart, have Jackson Dart maybe sit until the bye week, kind of reevaluate depending on how things go, and then you go from there. Only tough part about that division. I mean, Cleveland, not much to say about Cleveland, but are you going to be okay with kind of taking a step back and jailing your young rookie quarterback? Let's just say after week 8, week 7, your bye, whatever it might be. Are you okay with rolling your rookie quarterback out there and you are very much still alive in the playoff race, alive in the division, because no one ever really runs away with it unless like Baltimore did this year, but usually that's really not the case. So are you all right with trying to roll a Jackson Dart out there, like I said, week 7 or 8, and seeing what they can do? Or are you going to get a Rodgers, and are you going to get a Winston, a guy with a lot more experience, a guy that knows what it takes to win in this league, and kind of roll with the punches, whether that's good or bad, just because you want to stay competitive and possibly make a playoff push? I mean, Pittsburgh's in a tough spot. They are in such a tough spot, and it sounds so insane to say this because this is a team, how we mentioned it, always competitive, always in the playoff race, always over 500. But it seems like every single year we're trying to retool this team, or hey, what can they do to be better? And I know you say it every week, and I'm going to kind of reiterate it because it's the perfect thing where they are just stuck dead in the middle. They're not too good, they're not too bad. I mean, I don't know what it is for Pittsburgh, but at this rate, it's kind of, again, Rodgers, Winston, or you're cooked.
Yeah, I guess they could bring back Russ. I don't know. It feels like that ship has probably sailed. If they really wanted Russ back, you would just bring him back. And Russ now is visiting with Cleveland. He visited with the Giants on Friday. There was some TMZ guy following him around at Newark Airport. I'll never understand those people that just follow athletes or random people around. Like, it just doesn't mean, like, let the guy get on his plane with peace. Like, Mr. Unlimited. But yeah, if they could get Russ back, Russ would jump into number 2 behind Rodgers, probably.
I'd say I can see Russ coming back just because of obviously the DK connection, very close friends.
Yeah, make a good point.
Especially off the field. I mean, I don't know how much say DK might have with him being a newest member of that organization. So I don't know if that's going to be kind of a respect thing of a guy that's been in the league for quite some time. And, those type of things. So maybe if DK can have some influences like, hey, I want to try to run it back with Russ, see what we can do, then maybe. But then I think him and Pickens didn't get along that well. If I remember, I could be wrong. I thought I saw some reports where they always didn't seem eye to eye. So tough spot.
Yeah.
Tough spot.
I feel like Pittsburgh's been in a tough spot feels like this all started since Big Ben moved on. They, retired. And then they brought in Kenny Pickett, and they've been in a tough spot ever since.
Yep.
When was Pickett? 2022?
Yes, I believe so.
I think so, right? God, he did not last long. That was a quick go out there, play a couple games. Okay, you stink. Get rid of him. That was not.
I love Kenny Pickett. Just kind of feel bad for the guy. He's had so much upside coming into the league, but
Yeah.
it just goes to show you it's not that easy to draft a franchise quarterback like a lot
Nope.
of people think it is.
Nope. And it felt like too, and I was high on Kenny Pickett too, actually coming out of college. He had experience, right? He played 5 years at Pitt, I believe it was. He was in college from like crazy looking back at it, but like 2017, I think was like his freshman year. He was coming in older, but I think what a lot of people, what was so intriguing about Kenny Pickett was, he was from Jersey, so he was in, not from Pitt, but he was, in the East, grew up in the East Coast, went to Pitt. The Steelers and, Pitt, they share a facility. So he was basically going through those doors for 5 years. The only difference now is basically he's across the hall. You draft him. I think there was already a lot of support for him in that city from his college days, throwing 40 plus 42 touchdowns, I think it was his senior year. It felt like it was one of those. I liked him coming out of college. I did. It felt like it was one of those, went to Pitt from the East Coast. City was already behind him, already was familiar with, the team, the organization, how things run, the expectations. Because, Pitt's, playing in that city, playing for that franchise, there is a lot that comes with that. Of course, a very storied franchise. It felt like that in itself was a big deal, and it just fell flat. It just shows that it's not easy. Not easy at all. Anyway, I think he's with Cleveland now. So you might get a Pickett Russ Cleveland quarterback room. How about that?
Got traded to Cleveland. Yeah, that's it's interesting.
Got a ring, and then goes to Kenny Pickett has a Super Bowl ring. If you ever want to make a Bills fan mad, all you got to tell him is Kenny Pickett's got a Super Bowl ring. Brian Hoyer's got more rings than your team. If you ever want to make him mad, just come up with a random player. Kenny Pickett now is added to that list. Anyway, we'll stay in the AFC here. We'll go to the West. Denver Broncos, 10-7 season last year. First year with Bo Nix, I should say. Make the playoffs, losing the wild card. Always interesting to see. We kind of got the 49ers, Commanders approach rather of what they were going to do this offseason after what happened last year. You bring in Deebo Samuel. You add some other pieces. I do think the Commanders, I don't know if you saw this, they gave Javon Kinlaw 3 years, $45 million.
Yeah.
To me, that was a horrible move. As somebody that watched Javon Kinlaw this year, I could play better defensive tackle than him. He was horrific. Should have been benched. I should have never even played. But either way, Commanders have done some good things. Don't like that move, but you've kind of seen the Commanders approach. Was interesting to see what Denver would do. How much do you – it's always interesting because, like, how much do these teams sort of – not really go all in, but, like, how much are these teams willing to spend after a good first year with a rookie quarterback, or are they kind of still stand pat, let some of these guys on the roster play out and then more add the year after? It's always interesting to see what type of players, how much they're willing to spend after a year like this where nobody saw them. I mean, heck, maybe win 5 games and let alone go on and win 10 and make the playoffs was crazy. And they've made some really good moves. You add Dre Greenlaw, you add Hufanga from the Niners as well. I always mess up his first name. Talanoa Hufanga, safety, who I really liked. I actually liked him as a potential option for the Jets. He had a Steve Wilkes connection. But so they had 2 49ers guys. They also added Evan Ingram, which I really like. I'm actually kind of surprised Evan Ingram didn't have much more interest on the market. It felt like he kind of flew under the radar. I don't know if it's because he got released pretty late and maybe teams had their eyes set on other guys. Not even that, though. Like, the tight end market, not very good. It's basically Evan Ingram, and then it was like Juwan Johnson and Tyler Conklin. Now, Conklin's still out there, but I believe Juwan Johnson is back with New Orleans, I believe.
I believe he re-signed.
Yeah. Ingram's better than both those guys. Kind of surprised he didn't have a bigger market. But I like that move a lot for Denver, especially because they didn't really have a tight end last year. So you throw Ingram into the mix, very good receiving tight end. Dre Greenlaw, you add that to a defense that was already elite last year. The biggest question with Greenlaw is the injuries. Of course, he's dealt with some injuries. Only played, had the injury in the Super Bowl, led him to only play, I believe, 2 games last year. Had an injury a couple years ago as well. I believe in 2021 it was. But either way, you add Greenlaw, who's a very, very good linebacker when he's healthy. And you had a very good under the radars use safety in Hufanga, who I believe was one of the better safeties on the market. And you had a really good receiving tight end in Evan Ingram. So you add to a defense that was already elite. You get Bo Nix another weapon. They made some really, shrewd moves so far.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw another name in. I guess I'm going with a lot of the under radar signings, but Trent Sherfield, another one, I believe was in Miami before. He was just in Minnesota and was in Miami before then. Who I actually, down in this area, you get a lot of Miami games, so watch a lot of Sherfield, and he's a very solid wide receiver 3. And you bring that in with Cortland Sutton, who I got to give his props. I was not a big Cortland Sutton fan. Thought it was very overrated, just big body, no hype. Who had a resurgence type of year, very great year. Obviously, we know what Bo Nix brought over. I mean, I think we spent time bashing them in Carolina like it was clockwork last offseason, and they surprised us. But back to just all the moves, Greenlaw, of course, Hufanga, Ingram, that just comes down to great management. I mean, yeah, last year was a surprise for everybody, but how can we get better? How can we address team needs? We already know what the Denver defense is about. You add 2 very vital pieces on the defensive side, and now kind of to circle back on Evan Ingram, I did not understand that from Jacksonville's standpoint whatsoever. And I agree. I don't know why the market wasn't a lot better for Ingram. I mean, we're talking about a guy. I know he had the injury last year with, I believe, the growing injury or the hamstring, one of the two. But Ingram is a great receiving target, like absolutely great receiving target. He's reliable, and Jacksonville just let him walk. But I mean, for Denver's sake, like you said, they didn't really have a tight end. Can't even name who their tight end was last year. But now you get Ingram, who can be a security blanket for Bo Nix. I mean, I don't know what they're cooking up in Denver, but they've had some brutal years after Peyton. Well, every year after Peyton was brutal up until last year. So I like what they're doing. I mean, I guess everyone's tired of Kansas City getting to the Super Bowl. So Denver, I think Denver, we see them probably back in the playoffs again next year.
Yeah, definitely. I believe it was Adam Troutman. But I mean, just looking at the numbers, 188 yards last year. Didn't do a whole lot. They didn't have much production at all at that position. There was very little production at tight end. Ingram's a massive upgrade, of course, both those guys. And just again, that's what I like. They've spent some good resources. You also mentioned Trent Sherfield. They're making sure to continue to add to the offense along with, adding to the defensive side of the football. I don't see why this team can't go and make the playoffs again. And this is gonna sound crazy, but I don't know how to phrase this. I guess outside of, I don't know, who would you like right now if the season started today and we were talking about week 1 right now? Who do you think finishes better, Denver or the Chargers? Denver. Now, Chargers, what about the Raiders? Where do they fall into place?
I think they're obviously going to be a lot better than they were last year. I just don't think, even with Geno over there, I just don't think Jacoby Myers and
not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah. Is it crazy to say that? Denver finishes in second, and then you get
crazy to say first. They play Kansas City very tough.
They should have beaten Kansas City twice. The blocked field goal in week what was that, 10? They got, Will Lutz, it was like a 30-yard, it was a chip shot, and they blocked it. Shot. That was a typical Kansas City voodoo magic win out of the middle of nowhere. They should have swept Kansas City. It's not crazy. to say that Denver can challenge Kansas City a little bit.
And we've just over the few years, I mean, Chargers obviously kind of bouncing back, but we've seen the Raiders and the Broncos be very kind of pesky when it comes to matching up with Kansas City.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point.
it's so tough to count them out. Mahomes is still dropping back and throwing the ball. So, you don't want to completely go away from Kansas City and you just don't trust and believe in what they can do. But I mean, at some point, right, it has to run out. Like they're not going to win this division until every year until Mahomes retires. So I
Yeah.
think Denver has a great chance this year of knocking Kansas City off.
Yeah. Denver had that drought against KC, but it feels like you said, over the last 2 years, they've played a much better, right? They split 2023, and then last year they should have swept, but they won one of the games. Of course, that was the Wentz game where they, blew them out and got into the playoffs. Yeah, look, it's a lot of credit to Sean Payton and George Patton and all those guys over there to come in, take a roster that was, they had some okay talent, but I don't even think I think it's just a lot of great coaching they've got. Obviously, Payton elevating Knicks. I don't think you look at this roster and you look at the talent and it blows you away. It's the names, I should say. Like Cortland Sutton is good, but I don't think he's not up there with the Justin Jeffersons or Jamar Chases of the world. Heck, even just is he? I mean, I don't know, he might be the best receiver in the division, number one.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that.
So maybe he's, but Sutton either way though, he's not like a top 5 elite wide receiver.
Yeah.
Marvin Mims is solid, but again, not a guy that I think a lot of people are going to look at and be wowed about. Yeah, Trent Sherfield. I think you got to look at one of the underrated players actually just going in next year would be Troy Franklin.
Absolutely.
If he can step up, you add Sherfield, you add Evan Ingram. If Troy Franklin could step up as a receiver next season and play a much bigger role there, that's something that is huge for this team. 4th round pick, did some really good things at Oregon. I think we both liked him coming out of college. If he could step up and you look at a wide receiver room that's got Franklin playing well, Sherfield, good depth piece, Cortland Sutton, doing what he's been able to do, another 1,000-yard season last year, and then throw Mims in there as well, it could be really dangerous. Plus Knicks in year 2. Definitely
only thing I don't like for Denver is the running back room.
Yeah, I was just about to bring that up. You lose Javonte Williams, and it's Jaleel McLaughlin.
And I believe Audric Estime. I'm not really.
I believe so.
Liking
and Tyler
that.
Beatty, I think, is the third. He had that one good game. I think Tampa last year had that one really good game where he had I think it was 70. He didn't do a whole lot, but I think he had 70 yards, and then he didn't play the rest of the year.
I'm not liking it. I don't know if they're going to address it in the draft, and probably do we see them take a running back with the first round? I don't know. I mean, I don't like what they're rolling out in that running back room. Whatsoever.
No. And they're gonna have to get that figured out because you've got to take some of the pressure off of Knicks, I mean, like we said, they're set up very well, but you don't want to get to a situation where defenses start to figure out Knicks a little bit and you don't have a good solid run game to go back to, because their run game last year was very good.
Sorry, what were you about to say?
Oh no, you could go.
Yeah.
You could go.
So I might have a running back that will be a very good fit in Denver once we get to that. So they could address that in free agency.
Just go from one orange team to another.
We might be on the same page.
I guess we can get to that. Nick Chubb,
absolutely. I mean, my 3 landing spots for Chubb was either Cleveland, Pittsburgh, or Denver, which I think would all be great fits. We're not going to go back over Pittsburgh losing Najee and Jalen Warren and nobody else now. Cleveland, obviously, has been there his whole career, maybe get a hometown discount. But yeah, Denver, I think, would be a great spot for him. I think Sean Payton will continue to get the most out of Chubb. And I know we talked about him
Mhm.
last week, I believe. You look at the injuries, yes, 10 games over 2 seasons. But 2022, I mean, was it 1,500 yards when he was fully healthy?
Yeah.
It's just is he going to be fully healthy? How much of are you willing to kind of go and buy low, get a high reward off of Nick Chubb at this rate? I mean, again, you're rolling out Estime and McLaughlin. You have nothing to lose. I really would like Denver to make that happen, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a good point about Chubb. I totally agree. Again, we talked about this last week. Chubb's just crazy that if you would have told us, 2 years ago when he rushed for 1,500 yards that he hit the open market in 2025, you think, man, why would the Browns even let him get there? And then of course we see what happens. It's unfortunate what's happened to him. I still think that we can. You put him in a good offense with a solid offensive line. This isn't. I know he's 29 and has had the major knee injury, but I think he's still capable of being a very,
Yeah.
very good number one, and it'd be great value. It'd be a low risk, high reward because you'd get him for cheap. And your high reward is he finds, maybe he's not that 1,500 yard, 12 touchdown guy, but is it crazy that he can still rush for 1,000 yards? I don't think so.
Not at 1,007, 8, maybe 9 touchdowns, depending on
Yeah.
how they look in the goal line. That is a great year, and it takes a lot off of Bo Nix, which is what they
Yep.
need.
Yeah, exactly. Your two biggest needs, it feels like, were running back and tight end. If you had to guess, just because of tight end last year wasn't very good, and running back this year, of course, Javonte Williams loses in him as well. Not that he was that great, but you filled the tight end hole. You now fill running back hole with Nick Chubb. You're in a perfect spot. Then you can really make a push to try and compete at a much higher level in that division than maybe some expect. I guess with some other free agents, any other guys? I know maybe Diggs as well, where some of these other free agents move before we get into some of our teams and what they've done so far.
Yeah, I do have Diggs.
Where do you feel he'll end up? It's tough to get
Hopefully,
a
with
read on Diggs.
it is. It's like he can kind of go anywhere. I don't know
Yeah.
where he's at in his career. If he's trying to win, if he's trying to get paid.
Yeah.
I would love to see him playing with his brother, of course. Which feel
Yeah.
like this has been kind of trying to cast this net for some years now, but they are more in tune with signing everyone else. So don't see that happening. But I think New England for Diggs would also be a pretty decent spot. Again, that's kind of tough to say. It's hard for the read, like you said, because you don't know what it is that he wants to do, where he's at in his career. But for a team that, young quarterback, he'll obviously step in, be that veteran voice, and probably could make some noise, surprisingly. I think Diggs in a Pats uniform probably won't be too bad.
Yeah. I don't know. I could see Pitt. I could see New England. I'll say this about New England. They've had some good veteran free agencies land there, or free agents land there so far. Diggs could be another one. Like they signed Moses, they signed Carlton Davis, two really good players. I mean, Patriots make a lot of sense just because for Diggs, it makes sense from a perspective of you could probably go there for maybe a year or so, boost up your value, and then go somewhere else maybe next season. Plus, New England still needs wide receiver help desperately. They can't go out there next year with Booty, Demario Douglas, and Kedrick Bourne as your 3 wide receivers. And then, they can't. I know they signed Matt Collins. I'll just say this right now. Matt Collins is going to be a nobody next year. The only reason Matt Collins, who, by the way, wasn't even, he was good last year, but I think sometimes the way people talked about Matt Collins last year, it was like this guy put up 800 yards. He had 378 yards last year. Now, he did have 5 touchdowns, which was a career high, but some people talk about Matt Collins like last year, like he was this huge threat. The big thing was he was with the Bills. They were winning. He didn't, he doesn't wear shoes. He doesn't wear socks. Josh Allen elevated him. I don't know if he's going to be very good there. So Jalen Polk did nothing last year. Yeah, Diggs would make sense there.
I have another one. What do you think about Jacksonville?
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, they move on from Kirk. Him and Brian Thomas Jr., that'd be a fun pairing. That'd be
Absolutely. I
fun.
mean, you can't. I know we said it, but you can't rely too much on Gabe Davis. So I
No.
mean, you kind of move Gabe to that. Still your outside guy, but kind of your third option. And yeah, Brian Thomas and Diggs. I think that would be interesting.
How realistic do you think Dallas is?
I don't know. It's so tough with so many receivers on the roster right now, but obviously you're not winning with CeeDee Lamb, Paris Campbell, Jonathan Mingo, Jalen Tolbert, Jalen Brooks, like not at all. So I mean, if they're smart, I say you go out and get Diggs, you get him at a low price. Maybe his brother can have some influence on that. You still address the receiver position in the draft, and those other guys can respectfully kick rocks. Because again, you're not winning with them. So or moving to the practice squad, something like that. Um, I would go get them if I could, but I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we'll get to Dallas here in a second. It feels like they're linked to a lot of these guys for leverage in a way,
Yep.
like you were mentioning. I know off air. Like the Jets, just from the Jets' perspective, I don't think they'll get Diggs. I think it's a little too out of their range. They need a receiver help, but I don't think Diggs is that guy that they would look at. I don't know. I don't know who the Jets are going to look at. It's the wide receiver class right now is drying up pretty quickly. Like you have Diggs, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, good veterans, Brandon Cooks as well. And then you get into Deontay Johnson, who the heck even knows if he's going to play this year? I mean, this guy, I mean, how many more times can we jump around teams? Lockett, well, he'll find a home. Robert Woods is, I'm sure he'll find some place as like a fourth option. But Tyler Boyd, DJ Chark, Nelson Aguilar, Elijah Moore, Rondell Moore I actually like.
Yeah,
but
very good slot.
Yeah, I'd take him with the Jets just because he's cheap and he's still young. But who knows? Allen Robinson, McCole Harmon, he's still out there.
Oh,
It's.
I think the Jets will disband that organization before they bring McCole Hardman back.
Him or Elijah Moore. I actually saw a Jet fan the other day that proposed the idea of bringing back Elijah Moore. I understand it's a new regime, but no, that's not happening.
That's not at all. I forgot that even happened, if we're being honest.
Yeah. It was a weird time. Yeah. Diggs is probably the top option left, to be honest. Him and Rodgers, like in terms of names and contract, they're like the two biggest left. I'll be honest. I don't know. I just sitting here thinking, I'm kind of surprised that Diggs hasn't been picked up. I mean, I think a lot of people are. I know he's getting older. He's 31 and stuff, but like, I don't know. The guy, he got hurt last year. I understand that, but let's not act. This guy prior to that had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. Was it something like? I think it was. Or was it? No, it was 6 straight actually. 4 straight with Buffalo, but overall, I think he had 6 straight dating back to the 2018, 2019 with Minnesota.
And was having a heck of a year before he got injured.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you actually mentioned that. It kind of surprises me too from Houston to not kind of jumping to go get him. I know him and Christian Kirk, similar in a sense, not like similar, but not similar at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. It just makes sense in my head. But I mean, you throw Diggs in that, we're talking about wide receiver 2 option. You still got Nico over there, Kirk in the slot, and of course, still roll out with Schultz. I think that's still a pretty good offense.
Yeah.
And then you wait for Tank Dell to get back, which I believe he might miss the entire 2025 season. But let's look ahead to 26. So you do roll out that same core. You get Diggs on like a 2-year. Kirk is obviously still there. Collins, Schultz. That's a great offense. Hopefully Mixon's still healthy and going. I don't see why they won't bring Diggs back.
Yeah. No, yeah, you make a good point. You feel like they would maybe be a little bit more like Diggs to me, out of the other 3 veteran wide receivers that are available in terms of expense, like the most expensive, like Diggs to me is I take him significantly at higher value over Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen. To me, he's still got a lot more left than those guys, especially Amari Cooper. I mean, he just disappeared on the Bills.
Is he?
I don't know how you go to Buffalo and just disappear like that, but he did.
He might be washed.
Yeah.
So
Keenan Allen, I think,
washed,
actually still has a little bit more in the tank. I just think rookie quarterback, terrible situation last year. There was only so much he could do.
I can tell you this. If Amari Cooper is washed, there's one place where he will be a great fit.
Dallas.
And that is Tennessee.
Oh, Tennessee. Yes, that's a good point.
Tennessee brings all the washed guys. I seen this tweet a few days ago, and kind of the truth. A receiver going to Baltimore or Tennessee, yeah, your career is over. So if Amari Cooper ends up in one of those 2 spots, you had a great career. Thank you for everything you've done, but we'll see.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Tennessee is a very washed destination. Even Tyler Boyd goes there and doesn't do anything.
I forgot he was there.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess to close things out, we could take a look at some of the Jets, some of the Cowboys moves. I guess we could start with Dallas. Haven't done a whole lot. I mean, Paris Campbell, who biggest issue, he just doesn't play. He doesn't play. He's hurt all the time. I think the most games Paris Campbell has ever played in a season is like 12. Is it? Or did he have one full season? No, he did play one full season with the Colts and then played 12 games for the Giants. But other than that, 7-2, 6-5. Last year with Philly didn't do much. I don't know. I mean, it feels like Dallas, very similar spot that they were in last year where they're, Javonte Williams, but it's about it.
And Miles Sanders as well. That was another. I know they said this is what I can give some props and some credit. Making way more moves this year than last year. Last year I think it was like Eric Kendricks and nobody.
The long snapper.
And the long snapper. I think they re-signed again. Also they say they will be selectively aggressive, which is, I guess, what they have done. It's just the names that they're bringing in. And before I even say that, I look at it from two ways of it, where you look at the name and you're like, all right, the guy hasn't done anything since he's been in the league, whatever. But then you kind of look at the other side, and you hear me say this often. Sometimes you need a new scheme, new change of scenery, and you elevate. Look at Zach Bond, for instance. So you try to give a little bit of leeway, try to give a little bit of grace, and hopefully those guys can make something shake. But there's just no way where I'm going to use Paris Campbell, Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, heck, even Allen Robinson are available, and you sign Paris Campbell. You signed Paris Campbell to pair with CeeDee Lamb. You could have brought Brandon Cooks back. You signed Paris Campbell. Williams and Sanders, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully they still address the running back room in the draft. Maybe go to 3 kind of guy rotation this year. Maybe one of them won't be on the roster going into the year. I don't know. They needed a running back. They did that. I don't know what they're doing. The only one move I can say I do really love, and it's going to be biased, but that was trading for Kyer Elam. You know the backstory with that. I think he definitely needed a new change of scenery, a new scheme. Buffalo was a little rough for him this last year in the playoffs. But Dallas has been known to be able to, gel and shape their corners to be very good. So hopefully he can come over there and, revive his career. Obviously, his dad played for Dallas too, some earlier years. So that's great. But other than that, I can't tell you what they're doing. If I had to rank this free agency, I would give it like a D+, just because the names aren't the most attractive. But, hey, you are addressing needs a lot. I did like Kenneth Murray a lot. I always liked Kenneth Murray. I liked him in college as well. So I like the addition of Kenneth Murray at the linebacker position.
Mhm.
Outside of Murray, Elam, I'm not really loving what they've done. It's more like hey, we did something, shut up, leave us alone, and Dak, put on your cape. That's what it feels like. Again.
Yeah. They also brought in Dante Fowler too, right?
Yes, Dante Fowler is back. I do love that one as well. Forgot about
Yeah.
that one.
That was a good move. I actually think you look at Dallas from a defensive perspective, you like the moves they've made there a lot more. Like
Absolutely.
Kenneth Murray, Dante Fowler. Fowler's coming off of a 10.5 sack season,
Yeah.
which was a very productive year for him at the age of 30. He'll be 31, former, first round pick. He was with Dallas, the last 2 years before last year?
Yeah.
I believe.
Dallas, Washington, back to Dallas.
Yeah. He's bounced around. I think he spent some time with the Rams, Falcons too.
Yeah.
Prior, it's obviously all after the Jaguars, where he didn't really quite pan out there. Yeah, I think they've made some good moves defensively. Offensively, you still need to find the next weapon next to CeeDee Lamb. I mean, is that through the draft? Do they take a chance on like a Tet McMillan, Luther Burden, somebody like that? Is that their approach if they love somebody that much? I guess you roll with that, but I still think it can't hurt to bring in. You could still bring in somebody like a Stephon Diggs or even an Allen Robinson and then draft somebody. You don't have to bargain shop and go Paris Campbell, who is he even what is he? A 5? A 4?
I can't tell you what it is. Again, our receiving core is CeeDee Lamb and everybody else. I mean, Tolbert, Tolbert's all right. Dak loves him, and I think he did come up clutch and make some plays kind of down the stretch. But Tolbert's a 3, maybe a 4. So it's like, all right, great. It's still Mingo and Brooks, and just like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's they got to spend more. They got to spend more than they have. You'll also get some guys back in the secondary, right? Well, you did lose Jordan Lewis.
Jordan Lewis,
I know
yeah.
that goes to Jacksonville. You get Bland back after missing time last year. I mean, if this roster right now, I guess, if this roster right now, week 1, what would be your expectations?
8 or 9 wins.
If they add Diggs, how much does that move the needle if they would add Diggs and draft? I don't know, draft Gentry and add Diggs.
Then I think we are in the mix, probably better than Washington. Philly still wins the division.
Yeah. Yeah. Feels that way. Which way do you think they'll go draft? Like, do you go receiver, running back?
It's tough. I don't know who's going to be on the board at the time. Personally, if it were up to me and I had the option, we're sitting at 12. I go like Luther Burden or McMillan if one of those two are there, just because this might contradict kind of everything I've probably ever said. Hear me out. There is some instance where you don't need a great running back all the time. Where, I think if you can roll out CD, Burden, or McMillan, one of those two, Jalen Brooks kind of takes another step. Obviously, Jake Ferguson, we know what he's capable of at the tight end position. If you're able to get the most out of all those guys, Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams, I mean, if they can give you Sanders give you 800-900 yards, I think that's a good year. I think that's enough. I don't think you need a 12, 13, 1400 yard rusher with that offense if they go receiver. But I think if Gentry is on the board, you have to get Gentry. I mean, but then you're going to struggle in the passing game. So you're kind of in like a gray area where it's a lose almost, no matter which way you look at it. You go receiver, you're going to struggle. here. Okay, let me rephrase. My apologies. If you go receiver, I think the running back position obviously will suffer a little bit, but I think you can overcome it depending on how great the passing game is. 800 yards out of Sanders, I think that's productive. That's enough. But if you go running back and you don't address the receiver whatsoever, I think they're going to struggle, and we're looking at 8 to 9 wins.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it's very boom or bust. Like, it feels like probably either average or slightly above average in a way, right? 8 or 9 or what, 11?
Yeah, it's one of those. And I mean, that schedule is also very tough.
Yeah.
So I
I'll
don't know.
definitely have some guarantees this year on the Dallas winning games.
I don't know if that's a good decision, but there's a few times last year you kind of had Dallas as far as our underdogs, and they surprised me. So
Yeah.
I think I trust your word more than I actually trust the Dallas Cowboys right now.
Yeah. And then you have obviously Schottenheimer, first-time coach. You feel like he is, before we get to the Jets and close things out, you feel like he is like is this like a 1-year thing with him, you think? Like if they miss the playoffs, they're finding somebody else next year?
No, I think they're gonna give him. I think they're gonna give him 2. I
2 years.
mean, the only thing that's kind of tough, you look at last season, all the injuries, so you kind of give a little
Yeah.
bit of leeway. But you look at the years before that, it's like 12-5, 12-5, 12-5, and then you get everybody
Yeah.
healthy. But we're sitting at 8 and 9. Like, what are we doing? But then again, hey, he does not make the signings. He doesn't play the game inside the lines, and he doesn't make the moves for the front office. So I think it's going to come down to, and how it always has been for since the last Super Bowl appearance, it's going to come down to what the front office does or doesn't do. Doesn't matter who you bring in there. You can bring in, Belichick and whoever else. You can establish, or you can bring together the greatest coaching staff of all time. The front office does absolutely nothing. So poor Scotty, but or Shoddy, whatever he wants to call him, but I think they kind of set him up for failure.
Shoddy. Schottenheimer.
Yep.
Good old Jets connection. Anyway, moving on to the Jets. Just some quick thoughts here. I like Fields a lot. It's a good low risk, high reward move. And you bring him in. At worst, he's a stopgap for the year. At best, maybe you get your Darnold or Baker resurgence out of him and you find a long-term fit. I like Cisco a lot as well. Stevens, for the contract that they gave him, I'm a little concerned. The $23 million guaranteed, $36 million over 3 years. Is young, has some upside. I think the big thing with him though isn't great when it comes to playing the ball. But again, I've said this a couple times. It's Muji and Glenn's first free agency. You've got to give them a benefit of doubt. I also think a player like Stevens, a cornerback, working with Glenn being next to Sauce, I think could benefit him. Obviously, Michael Carter as well at the nickel. Really, though, the Jets after that and then re-signing Jamie and Sherwood, those are like their big moves. Other than that, it's been a lot of depth guys. And that's kind of been the Jets' approach. And so far, it's this free agency has kind of been, I think with Sherwood, Fields, maybe that makes it like a B minus maybe, but there's not many big moves. There's not many like starters that they're adding. They're adding a lot of depth pieces that have potential to be starters if the Jets are able to tap into some of their untapped potential. It's a lot of young 1-year cheap contracts and putting, a lot on this coaching staff to try and develop these guys where maybe you find something in some of these different pieces. So that's kind of been the approach they've taken. I like Tyler Johnson, the receiver they picked up the other day. I like Josh Myers. Some of these other guys, though, like Chuck Okafor, Rashad Weaver, those are kind of just like depth pieces that you probably don't really have much expectations for. this team still needs some more help at wide receiver, even with Tyler Johnson addition. They still need probably more so a 2 and a 3. Johnson's probably a wide receiver 4, maybe wide receiver 3 if he gets upside, but most likely wide receiver 4. Yeah, I'm not surprised this is the approach they've taken. I guess we'll see. They've got still a lot of work to do, and I think they'll address that during the draft. So
at 7, I mean, if you had to choose, where are you going at pick 7?
Right now, I prefer a playmaker at 7, whether that's a Tyler Warren or a Tet McMillan. I like McMillan a lot. And I think with the way the board might shake out, I think there's actually a pretty good shot that McMillan falls to us. So I'd go like McMillan or Warren. And then now they don't have a right tackle. Armand Membu out of Missouri. I like him a lot. Guy that played right tackle at Missouri. That's what the Jets need. So many of these fans are like, oh, Will Campbell. He plays left tackle. Yes, he could come and play right tackle, but I'd prefer to just take a guy that's already played right tackle, knows how to play the position. He could slot in right away. So I'd go McMillan, Warren, Membu. Maybe you take a Mason Graham, but I just don't see Mason Graham falling. I think he's going to get picked up by one of the top 6. I think Jacksonville is definitely a realistic spot for him right in front of the Jets. Or number 5, rather. Not 6 is the Raiders. But, yeah, I like McMillan a lot just because they need receiver help, and I think he complements Garrett well. Or they could trade back, and you get an Emeka Ibuka, somebody like that. I could be on board with that, but does the team get really desperate and trade up? If Shadur's there at 7, do they take him? I don't think they would. I wouldn't love that, but I think playmaker, because they need help at that spot, and you want to surround Fields with as much as you can. So we'll see. Anyway, any closing thoughts?
Not much. I just hope Dallas gets another receiver. I don't know. Thinking about Diggs now as a potential guy that we can sign. Hopefully they're smart. But that's all.
Yeah. See what happens this week. Kind of the second wave of free agency this week. See if Diggs, Rodgers, these type of guys fall off the board. Get some more answers. And we'll be back next week. So, as always, thank you for watching and talk to you soon.